Hello and welcome to Troubleshooting Zen Study and Practice number 42. And this time we have the following question. What is the difference between I am consciousness and no I consciousness? We talk a lot about self and no self, I and no I in Buddhism and certainly in Zen Buddhism as well. So this is a pivotal question, really, something that's very important. And when we're talking about the practice of Buddhism, we talk about, certainly in my own school, the instructions that are given for daily life practice, for what is commonly called the practice of mindfulness, is something very precise. It's called to give myself wholeheartedly into what at this moment is being done. So to give myself, that's the self, give myself away into what at this moment is being done. And that merging with this apparent separation between myself and what is being done, the doing, this is referred to as Samadhi. Technically, it can be referred to as non-duality or non-dual activity. Has all sorts of various sort of names attached to it, sometimes called the great functioning and so forth. These are the things that are referring to this state that, as it were, appears when this appearance, or what the Buddha called the delusion of I, is actually out of the way. But that doesn't necessarily answer the question of what exactly is I. So that's what we're going to start off with and have a look at. And really, to kick us off, there's from the Pali Canon, there is an example that was given by the Buddha when he was talking to his monks, and was also someone was asking about this question of the self. And the self being in charge, because that's how we do experience it, isn't it? There's here I am talking, possibly there you are listening. Maybe you're doom scrolling as well. Maybe you're doing something else, driving the car, or I don't know, listening to this on earphones or something like that, whilst you're doing something else. But there is that feeling that I am doing these things and I am choosing to do these things. I choose whether to listen to this talk or whether not to, and so on. These are my choices. The things that I pick and choose throughout the day. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, or I must do this, and then I ought to do that, and so on, or I don't want to do that, or whatever it might be. There's still this self-referential thing. So the Buddha was, as I say, gave this example. He said, "O monks, what would you think if there was a king in a kingdom, and one day he said to his army, march south from the capital until you reach the border?" And they did not go. They ignored him. And then the following day he gave the command to the army, march north from the capital for 100 miles, and the army took absolutely no notice of him. Would you say that that king was in charge? Would you say that he was able to function or operate as a king? And the monk said, "No, Lord, of course not, because an army would obey a true king, would obey a true king who had the authority to order them about. But if someone gave this command and they didn't move, then obviously he couldn't be the king, he couldn't be the ruler." And so the Buddha said, and so it is with the body. He said, it doesn't matter if you say do not age, because the body will age. If you have an infirmity, if you say may that infirmity be gone, you cannot. It will not go. If you're hungry and you say I banish hunger, the hunger will not go. And so you are also not the ruler of your own body. And so it is also with your own mind too. And this is, it's a very simple example, but I think a very useful one, showing this difference between ruling and not ruling, and what we are in, what, so to speak, I am in charge of and what I am not in charge of. And actually, as we begin to look at it, less and less am I really in control. And actually, what we are left with is an appearance of control. So let's sort of look a little bit more closely at that, because again, there is this appearance of I being in control. But I remember very much my own teacher, the late Master Dayu, giving an example. She said, you know, if you wanted to get up out of your chair and walk, you can do so. There's no question about that. However, she said, do you know how you walk? Do you know which muscles to move in what order to coordinate, lifting the body out of the chair or off the cushion, and walking out of the room? And she said, no, even if you're a doctor, it wouldn't make any difference, even if you knew the names of all the muscles. To know precisely how to stand up and balance the body is something that I don't know, and in fact is something that I don't need to know either. And what she was pointing at there was what the Buddha was pointing at there, that there is this one who thinks he is in control, but actually when we look at it more closely, he isn't. Um, it may well be the case that we can stand up and walk, but we don't. It's true, we don't know actually how we do it. So there is something else that does the walking. And if we bring that more into this moment, here I am doing the talking. Do I know how that talking takes place? Do I know how to move my larynx and to breathe in just the precise way, and to move my tongue, mouth, and lips to form these words? And it's more than that, because that's just the physical side. There's also a cognitive side to this as well, because I'm not just making sounds. I'm actually speaking a language, and as I speak, you can hear this voice. Now I know this voice is obviously going through various electronic devices, but that actually is not relevant to this point, because even as you hear my words, you are not just hearing noise, you are actually hearing sensible words. You're hearing a language, and you are being given an understanding, and the understanding that you're being given is the one that's arising in my mind right now, and as a result of this language is arising in your own mind. Now, if you are in charge of this process of hearing and understanding this language, then see if you can switch it off. See if you can stop hearing these words as English and sensible and meaningful, and see if you can just hear it as noise, as if you'd never heard the English language or even a language before. Can you just hear the noise, or is automatically the understanding being given to you? Well, I think the truth is fairly obvious. You can't just switch off the understanding. And whilst your ears are working and you've still pressed the play button, you will hear this noise, this particular noise, as the English language, and whether you want to or not, you will understand what I'm actually saying, or what is being said, perhaps more accurately. So again, when it comes to hearing and understanding, there is something that is other than I that is in control of this process and that does this process. And when we talk about giving myself into the doing or into what is being done, it is into that one who is doing all this. The one who does the walking, the one who turns the head from right to left, the one who does the eating, the one who does the speaking, the one who does the hearing, and on the mental side as well, the one who understands, the one who pays attention or doesn't. Actually, the one who does all these things, who does all these processes, actually is not I. There's something else functioning. So now perhaps we're beginning to get this sense that as we begin to look at things a little bit more carefully and a little bit more detail, that there is an appearance of I being in control, but actually there's something else that's doing all these things. Because don't forget, if something interrupts that process, let's say, for example, I'm given a drug that paralyzes me, then even if I want to get up, I can't, because the one who does the getting up has been paralyzed. Um, and again, if I suffered some kind of brain trauma, for example, and wasn't able to speak anymore, despite the fact that I willed to speak, it's not going to happen, because actually I'm not the one who's in charge of that process. So what we have are two things that appear to be running almost in parallel. There's the one who does all these things, who senses things, who's sensate, what's known as Vijnana, the sense consciousness, but who also is active as well, can respond to circumstances, who responds to things as they are. If a fly flies towards my eye, the hand automatically goes up and the head turns to one side to avoid collision and hurt. And that is something that happens quite automatically. Again, Myokyoni used to say, Master Dayu Myokyo used to say, slipping on the proverbial banana skin. I mean, if I step out of my front door and I step out onto the pavement, and in so doing, put my foot on the slippery banana skin, what happens? Well, the slip takes place. The first thing that happens is that the body moves. The body rights itself immediately as best it can. Hopefully we don't fall over. The next thing that happens is the emotional reaction is like that. And then the third thing that happens is old slow coach I comes up with my opinion on the whole matter. Who the hell left that banana skin there? So there are those three distinct things. The body rights itself, the body takes action first. There's the emotional reaction, and then there's the thoughts that come afterwards. And that what we're particularly interested in is that one who moves first, that body who moves first. And I remember back in the 80s, there was a series of there's a documentary series on the brain and brain science and its functioning, and they showed an experiment where they had human participants, and they would be sat in front of a computer screen with a clock face on it and a second hand that was moving around quite quickly. And there was a button in front of them, and whenever they wanted to, they could press the button and that would stop the second hand. And the instructions that they gave to the participant was, just keep your eyes on the clock face, and whenever you want to, just press that button. But notice, please, where that second hand is when you make that decision to press the button. So this is what they did, and of course what they found was, let's say the second hand was at 5 to the hour when they made the decision that they were going to press the button. By the time they'd moved the hand and pressed the button, of course it would be 5 past the hour, it would show. Which is what you would expect. I make a decision, obviously there's a delay for the body to actually execute that decision. But what they found, because they had the participants fully wired up, not only their brains but also their body as well, and particularly around the muscles of the shoulder and the arm. And what they found was that if they made the conscious decision to switch off the button or to press the button at 5:2, the muscles in the arm began gearing up at 1:45. In other words, there was a time lag between the muscles beginning to move and the person making the conscious decision to press the button. So obviously that begged the question, how did the muscles know that there was a conscious decision coming to switch off the button, and thus how were they able to engage before that decision had been made? Well, the obvious answer was that the decision is only an appearance. The decision happens. It's not the cause of the movement. It's actually a result of something else deciding, something else outside of consciousness deciding to press that button. And that was quite a revelation to the scientists. Because they were still very much working on this sort of ghost in the machine model, that there's this little ghost of I who makes decisions, and once the decision is made, then the body sort of clicks into action. But actually, that clearly wasn't happening. It appeared that something in the body already knew, or made the decision, and then appeared to feed that decision through into consciousness, giving this appearance of a self, a person, making this decision to press the button, whereas actually it was the other way round. Well, as Buddhists, we shouldn't be too surprised by that, because this is something that's very similar to what the Buddha was also teaching. This teaching of no I. But what it really brought home was that we have this sense of conscious control, but we actually have an unconscious management of the systems. And in fact, I say that this is something similar to what the Buddha taught, because it's not exactly the same. The Buddha's no I is not quite that, because otherwise we can walk away with this sense that somehow no I is a sort of another state of consciousness, and that I am consciousness is also a state of consciousness. But actually, that's not what no I is. And to perhaps see that a little bit more, we just need to focus in a little bit more on this I. What is this I am that's appearing? Well, now we go a little bit into sort of the Buddhist psychology with this. There certainly in the Mahayana there was a school known as the Yogacara school, which had a sort of schemata or map of what mind is, and this is mind. This is mind rather than brain. By the way, this is how the mind was considered to work. We know that if we know our early Buddhism, we know that the Buddha also gave a theory of mind known as the 18 Dhatu, and it's a sort of tripartite a scheme that runs through the six senses. In Buddhism, there are six senses. There's the five physical senses, and there's also the cognitive sense, the mind itself, which cognizes mental objects such as thoughts, emotions, memories, and so on. And so this tripartite is made up of the objective sense, say, which may be a sound, the functioning of hearing, which is the sense organ, and then the allied consciousness, which is the hearing of that sound. And so it is through all the six, and 3 times 6 is 18. And the Buddha said, this is the all. This is everything that makes up what is known as mind. Appears here. Well, that schemata was tweaked in the Mahayana, and that the organ of mental cognition was split, and you had sense consciousness, but you also, which was called mano, and you also had another part called manas. Manas was the reflective consciousness. It was the ability of consciousness to reflect upon other states of consciousness. So manas is the consciousness that can reflect and say, I heard him speaking. Or so mano hears the voice, manas knows he's hearing the voice. So that's the reflective thing. That's so it can reflect on other states of consciousness. Mano is the consciousness. Manas is the consciousness that reflects on mano, if you like, that reflects on other states of consciousness. And the delusion arises because the reflection thinks it's separate from mano. So manas it deludedly thinks that it is separate from mano. In other words, the hearer thinks he's separate from what is being heard, but he's not. And that's the delusion of I. That is the delusion of I that thinks that. So, yes, I heard that. And what arises out of that, I heard that, then our other mental volitions can come in that Manas thinks arise from himself, such as his judgments and his opinions. I didn't agree with what he said, or I don't like what he said, or I thought his words were sweet to my ear. These are the judgments that I make, and now there is an I who has those judgments. So hopefully this is beginning to sound familiar. Um, this is how we think. This is how I thinks. But what is very clear from the Buddha's schemata is actually that there is this one who thinks he is separate is not outside of the dhatu. He's part of the dhatus still, and as a result, he arises due to what's called dependent origination because of causes and conditions, etc. And he's a subject to causality as the things he hears or doesn't hear or whatever. And this is the true nature of things. And that true nature of things is no I. So no I is not a state of consciousness, it's the true nature of things. So when the appearance, when the delusion of I is gone, is out of the way, then the true nature is ever present. And a useful analogy for this appearance of I, is the classic, moon, the moon that appears in a pool of water, say at night. You know how if you look into a pool, you can see the reflection of the moon. And the mistake is to think that the moon is actually in the water, whereas actually it's merely reflecting. The water is merely reflecting something from above. So we actually think that that reflection is something separate and discarnate from the moon that's in the sky. It's not. That reflection is dependent upon the moon in the sky. Without that moon in the sky, there is no moon in the water. But the delusion of I thinks that it is self-existing, thinks that it is independent from that one in the sky. So that's as quite a nice analogy there. This is quite difficult, and probably some of this is sounding somewhat obscure, and I sort of want to keep it reasonably practical, so that we can identify this I from our own lived experience. But I think it is important as well just to have an appreciation of the context of Buddhist psychology, which seeks to, as it were, give it that context, give our experience that context. So we have this consciousness then who thinks he is separate. Notice that I say he thinks he is separate. He's not actually separate. He's still resultant on causes and conditions, on things outside himself, and so therefore he's not really separate. But he thinks he is. And he gives rise to judgments and opinions, and he gives rise to emotional reactions such as liking and not liking, loving and hating, wanting and, not wanting, all those sorts of things, all my opinions as well, which get and we use that term opinions because my opinions evoke emotional reactions, don't they? Particularly if they're contradicted, particularly if I'm on Twitter or YouTube and I see something and I think rubbish. How dare you say that? Suddenly all those emotional reactions are triggered. And this is where the passions, or what's known as the fires, come in, because the fires create the basis for the feeling of I. So the appearance of I doesn't just arise, it's brought into existence because of the fires. So the fire of wanting and not wanting, the more that fire is present, the more feeling of I there is. So when one of my, if I'm angry, if I'm really angry at something, I think I can't bear it. I am furious. That feeling of I is very strong, and in that fury, in that anger, where I am, where that feeling of I is, there's a very distinct black and whiteness, isn't there? I am this, and you are my opponent, you are my enemy. And the stronger that fire is, the more implacable it becomes, and the more that I feel myself as well. And it's the same with my opinions. When my opinion gets triggered, I say all sorts of crazy things because I feel that I must. If I don't, then I will die. And that's what it feels like. But what we can see here is that this feeling of I is nothing more than this stream of thoughts, uh, tainted or buoyed up by these feelings, by these fires, these feeling toned thoughts. I won't do this. I must have 2 cups of coffee, otherwise I can't function first thing in the morning. No, I simply can't bring myself to do that. What do I think of this? How will this affect me? These thoughts themselves are the I am. So it's quite useful when, this question was, what's the difference between I am consciousness? That's right, because it's not I conscious. There is no I consciousness because there is no I. But there is a consciousness that says I am, or I want, or I won't, or you should, I think you should, or I think you shouldn't. This is all what's known as I consciousness, and this is what the Buddha said was a delusion. It was merely an appearance. And of course, once that's been triggered, although I think I'm in charge at the time, actually I'm not, and this is why, when the fire dies down, then we can begin to think, my goodness, what what was I saying? What was I doing? Why on earth did I say that? And this is when we regret. Because actually, like the king who thinks he can command the army and doesn't, the army goes and does its own thing. When the fires are triggered, the fires also go and do their own thing because they are conditioned by something that has nothing to do with who I think I am. And this is why when the fires are triggered, I can act out of character, or I was beside myself, or some such phraseology as that. And this is where that story of the monk who's sitting meditating in his little meditation hut, deep in meditation, and when it gets very deep, that feeling of I gets very thin, and the other side of I, of course, is fear. So a little bit of fear comes up, and that fear suddenly appeared as a little golden ball, a beautiful golden ball, just that seemed to bob up and down in front of the meditating monk. And he thought it was beautiful, and he was truly enamored of that little golden ball. And even though he was supposed to be in meditation and therefore keeping quite still, he couldn't help himself. He stretched out his arm to try and seize hold of that golden ball, and the little golden ball just jumped back a little bit. So the monk had to lean forward, and the ball jumped back a little bit further, and before he knew it, he was up off his meditation seat. And the little golden ball was leading him on a merry dance out of the meditation hut, down his little walking track, out and deep into the forest at night. And he didn't care. He didn't even realize what he was doing. This ball was just so attractive that he must have it. And so he stretched out, and every time he stretched out to grab hold of the ball just jumped to one side and then continued moving deeper and deeper into the forest. And finally, in the heart of the forest, there's a very tall tree, and the ball jumps up onto the lower branches, and the monk, now quite beside himself, scrabbles up after it. And the ball goes higher, and the monk goes higher, and the ball goes higher still, and the monk goes higher still. And now they're in the topmost branches of the tree, and the ball, now little golden ball, goes out along those thin, slender branches at the top of the tree. And the monk, quite oblivious of the danger that he's in, shinnies after the little golden ball, and the branches sort of swaying down and up and down and up. And now he thinks the ball can go no further. Now it's mine. And just as he makes to seize for the ball, the little golden ball vanishes. Now suddenly the whole predicament of where he is, high up in this tree, on a slender branch that could break at any moment, and suddenly the fear comes up, and he cramps up, clinging to that branch in terror, shouting out, "Help! Help!" And of course, there's nobody there. And there he remains until the following day, when the other monks who are on their arms round happen to hear him calling, and they come and rescue him. And as the Venerable Mahabua, the Thai forest monk who told that story originally, said, chewing the betel nut and spitting into the spittoon, he said, and it serves that monk right for allowing his heart to escape from him like that. Wow. And that's what happened, because it is not I who am in charge of this. When the passions when they ride me, they carry me away. And this is why we have our practice, why we have our discipline, in order to rein all that in. Because, of course, the passions themselves, the energy of the passions themselves, um, uh, uh, are the same is the same energy as the energy of as the energy of the warmth of heart and the clarity of seeing, the wisdom of the Buddha as well. So again, just to really answer that question, hopefully it's clear that that wonderful analogy of the sun behind the clouds, the true nature, which is no I, is blocked out by the delusion of I, which seizes consciousness and also seizes energy as well, that seeks to buoy itself up. And this is why our daily life practice is to give myself once again, when that feeling of I is there, to give myself once again into what at this moment is being done. And then, as it were, the split is healed, or the appearance of I is forgotten, and there is what's known as the rolling with it. And this is why in one of the great Mahayana sutras it says that the heart rolls with the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things are the everyday phenomena that we come into contact with day by day by day. The heart rolls with the 10,000 things. But that rolling is truly mysterious. And it is mysterious to I, because I cannot know that, because I am the one that is in the way of that rolling, and so cannot understand it, and that's fine. We simply fold the hands and we bow, and we once again reconnect with that vastness that is known as no I, or anatta, in the Pali, and with that reconnection, then we have truly come home to our true nature, which is, of course, the human heart.